I want to welcome in the president of Youngstown State, and as we know him in Columbus, the legendary former head coach to Ohio State football, Jim Tressel. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Stephanie.
And as we get started with this interview, right before I hit record, we got the notification that Maryland has paused their football activities and the game against Ohio State this weekend is canceled. Yeah, so I wanted to get your initial reaction, just to hear that.
Well, I tell you, it's a challenging time for sure. I think many of us are a little bit fatigued from a compliance standpoint, and we want to get things back to normal and that kind of thing. And one of the things, Stephanie, that we've been trying to talk to our people here at Youngstown State and here in the community in the region is I've been sharing a little thing called the Stockdale Paradox. So Jim Collins, Good to Great, and I think it's pages 84 to 89, talks about Stockdale Paradox. And Admiral Stockdale was the highest ranking United States military person to ever be in a prisoner of war camp. And he spent 8 years in a POW camp. I guess that's fitting, this being Veterans Day, to Admiral Stockdale. And so he survived 8 years, 25 tortures. Sometime Google up the YouTube that talks about the Stockdale Paradox. And we've been trying to talk about this with our folks. And it kind of goes like this. When he did make his way out of the prisoner of war camp and made his way back home, everyone wanted to know how he made it, and so many didn't. So many people took their own lives, just didn't make it through the challenge of the prisoner of war situation. And he said, ironically, the people that didn't make it were the optimists, which is kind of contrary to what we might think, hence the Stockdale Paradox. The paradox is that the people who were thinking, okay, I'm going to be out of here by Thanksgiving, or I'm going to be out of here by Christmas, or I'm going to be out of here by summer, or by my birthday, or whatever. Ultimately, they set all of those false goals that they had no control over, and mentally not being able to make it. And it's a little bit like what's going on with our, recent pandemic. Right off the bat, they told us, okay, 15 days, let's lock down. Let's, we'll get this thing, we'll get the curve flattened. Well, then they said, well, let's extend it 30 days. And then let's shut a little bit down. Well, let's open a little bit back up. Well, if we do this for a little while, we'll do this or that. Well, what Admiral Stockdale said was the way to approach a very difficult situation is to first and foremost have an unwavering belief that you're going to get it done, that you're going to, in his case, that he was going to get out of the prisoner of war camp. But most important is to make a series of good decisions every day and not put those false hopes out there. He totally believed he was going to get out of that prisoner of war camp, but he had no idea when. So he decided every single day, I'm going to make a series of good decisions, and I'm going to keep myself in the right frame of reference, the right frame of mind, and ultimately he made it out. And so I've been challenging our people that I know for sure that Youngstown State University is going to be a greater place than it's ever been. So will Miami, and so will Ohio State. But we don't know exactly when. We have to make a series of good decisions every single day. And so that's the difficulty, because, as we've worked hard and we lose a little bit of our endurance for, doing the right things and keeping in smaller groups and keeping our social distancing and washing our hands and wearing our masks and so forth. But you know what? We have to make those decisions every day. So I'm not surprised that we're in a difficult situation right now. In fact, the governor is going to have a 5:30 press conference today, which many people think there might be some strong things laid down. And I know he's very concerned. We meet with him all the time as university presidents, and we've been working extremely hard on campus. And knock on wood, we've been pretty fortunate here at Youngstown State keep our cases down. And we haven't had a student yet that's been hospitalized, which is fantastic. But so when I hear you say that the Maryland thing is stepped aside, I'm not shocked. I'm disappointed because you hate to lose your flow. You hate to lose that momentum that we're gaining, as Buckeyes. But the group that makes it through and the group that handles the situation and handles games that are postponed or moved to different days or maybe not even played, whoever handles that best on a day-to-day basis are going to be the ones at the end of the day, in the football sense, who are going to have a chance to, at the end of the season, maybe have an opportunity to play in the college playoffs. But it's going to take an extraordinary amount of discipline. And I think Coach Day is doing a fantastic job with his folks, but you're only one case away from and it's so difficult, but I've got a lot of faith in what he's doing. And I know he's really worked hard with his team to help them understand that every day we have to make a series of good decisions.
That was such a great analogy right out of the gate. It reminds me of career advice I get all the time in television is they say, don't compare your career, your journey to someone else's, or even in weight loss or fitness, they'll say, don't compare where someone else is at right now to where your journey is. So I think that was a great analogy in how people can look forward to this. And I talked to Coach Meyer a couple weeks ago about how culture will be significantly tested in college football programs this season in particular because of the adversity and the pandemic. Just curious to hear your thoughts on how culture can significantly impact a season this year with the pandemic.
Well, culture is all about making good decisions all the time and holding one another accountable, not wanting to let the other person down. One of the initiatives we're working on right now at Youngstown State is make sure you know before you go, meaning before you go home for Thanksgiving, make sure you know that, and so we're voluntary testing and kind of urging people, to do the testing, urging people to be smart about when they do go home. Young people in college probably are not going to have fatal outcomes with the COVID, but they can sure pass on fatal outcomes. And the chairman of our board of trustees is a lady named Anita Hackstead. She's a doctor and she's the CEO of a regional hospital here. And I was just on the phone with her this morning, and she was saying that it's really a little bit scary right now, that they're seeing it worse than even in April and May and March, in that now they're getting more of their workers who not getting infected at work. And just like the players aren't going to get infected at the Woody Hayes facility, right? Because the safeguards are so strong and the accountability is so strong. But it's when someone ventures off and all of a sudden lets their guard down and says, well, it's my aunt's 50th birthday and I ought to at least stop by, or whatever. I haven't been out for 3 weeks, so I'm going to go over to wherever. And so, that culture is all about being selfless. That's what culture is based upon. And there's no question about it. The people who have the culture that has the most endurance, because I think everyone wants to do the right things. Mm-hmm. You have the endurance, like Admiral Stockdale, to make good decisions every day.
Yeah, and more great insight too. And, you talked about culture and building, bringing in good personnel was a key contributor into building success into programs. And I was just curious as to what qualities in coaches did you look for, or qualities and players you looked for off the field that contributed to bringing them in and building the system around you?
Well, when it came to coaches, I really wanted to know them. I wanted to know the kind of people they were. We had a little saying that we tried to live up to. It was a quote from Albert Einstein. And he said, concern for man and his fate must form the chief interest of all technical endeavors. Never forget this in the midst of your diagrams and equations. Well, no one has more diagrams and equations than football. concern for man and his fate, concern for our team and their fate, their future, has to be the chief interest. So I was less worried about someone being a guru or a genius or a hot commodity or anything like that. I wanted the right kind of people that were going to have the concern for the guys they were coaching and their fate, their future, and to make sure that was more important than football. Of course, we wanted to win games. There's no question about it. But we felt the more that we worked on taking care of our young people as people, helping equip them for their futures, we would win games. Ohio State's going to attract good players. There hasn't been an Ohio State coach ever that hasn't won 75% of their games. I mean, that's just the way it is. You're going to get players. But you want the right kind of people coaching those players. And then as far as what, Stephanie, did we look for in players, we wanted to find out as much as we could about them. We weren't necessarily into the ranking systems and worrying about the stars and all that. You know, James Laurinaitis and Malcolm Jenkins, guys like that, they were like 2-star guys. AJ Hawk was like a 2-star or a 3-star guy. But they were the right kind of people. And of course, we wanted talented people. We had our share of 4- and 5-star players as well, but the stars weren't as important as their character. And so we wanted to learn as much as we could. We wanted to meet their families. We wanted to be in the school and go to the cafeteria and find out if the cafeteria worker thought that he was a good guy. See if the janitor thought he was a good guy. See if the English teacher. I used to always ask my players, who's your favorite teacher? Go meet your favorite teacher. And that was always a good indicator for me. And then we'd go meet their favorite teacher and we'd find out a lot about them because usually their favorite teacher is the one they spent the most time with and the best. And so really what we wanted is to make sure that we had the right kind of people. In our philosophy of things, we always wanted a lot of Ohio kids. You know, that I think the reason it's called The Ohio State University is because not many states have really only one large land grant school. You know, you think Michigan, Michigan State, Clemson, South Carolina, Iowa, Iowa State, Florida, Florida State. Well, Ohio really only has one of those mega schools. And so I thought it was a little bit our responsibility. You know, if you look at Michigan and Michigan State's rosters, there's lots of Michigan kids if you count both rosters. We only had one roster. So I wanted to make sure that we were chock full of Ohio kids that were the right kind of kids. We had great out-of-state kids, without question. But I thought that mesh of the right group of kids, and I didn't want a bunch of clones. Kirk Barton is way different than James Laurinaitis is, or Chris Gamble was, or you know, that type of thing. But they were all good kids in their own way, and that's what we really looked for.
And I think there's so many life lessons to learn from playing football. And you see a lot of success in athletes moving into business. And it was something you mentioned about good people bringing in good culture. I see that a lot in corporate America as well, and in businesses. And when you have a good manager, you're a lot more internally motivated. And so I'm curious in how your move to administration, how that's relayed into that field as well in higher education.
You know, it was an interesting pivot, Stephanie, because I had been in higher education for 38 years, but not in the big picture. I was myopic. I was just in the athletic department, and I had been an assistant coach. I'd been a head coach. I'd been an athletic director. I've been a head coach at medium-sized places, big places, but I'd never really been a part of that whole picture. And so I really felt that as I went in as a vice president first at the University of Akron and then a president here, that I really had to learn. I had to read as much as I could about the enterprise. I had to get to know and listen to and sit down with as many people as I could to find out what makes a good university tick. It's different than a good football program. It's so much broader. There's so many different things. We had kind of a common focus when we were a football program. It wasn't hard to be on the same page. It's a little bit harder when you have in our case, 5 different colleges, 200 different majors, all those different types of things. So I think learning as much as you can about the environment you're in, getting to know the people and what's important to them, and being willing to grow in that. And the thing we always wanted to do, Stephanie, with our players, or that I've wanted to do here as an administrator, is I always want to know what people are thinking, because what they're thinking is important, because it's what they're thinking. It's what they happen to believe. It's their reference point. And so I always wanted to know what my players were thinking. It takes a while to build relationships, whether it's with players or with a huge administration. But the only way you do it is if you find out what's important to them. Find out, what they're thinking, how they think we can be successful, what input they have. Make sure that they know that they're very valued. And so I don't think it's dissimilar running a football program as a university. It's just the magnitude is so much larger.
Yeah, and I noticed that so often in coaches at Ohio State, where they really are invested in the player and the assistant coaches as well, is that they want them to be as successful as they can be, even if they're no longer playing or working there. And I think that is very telling into the motivation that they build. And college football has changed so much since your earlier days. And even with, players getting paid, and I know you had experience with that, but next year they will have the opportunity with name, image, and likeness. And so I was wondering what your thoughts were on the progression of that since your time, and how it's evolved since then.
Yeah, it's really, I think it's inevitable. When I started coaching, Woody Hayes was making $40,000. And look at it now. Mm-hmm. Universities were making, a few $1,000,000, and look at it now. The players were making nothing then, and they're making nothing now. I'm not sure that's fair. Now, what will be difficult will be, how do you manage that? How do you, the NFL has figured it out, Major League Baseball, NBA, they have salary caps, and so they have a set of rules. So I'll be interested to watch. When I was there coaching in the 2000 to 2010 area, the discussions were beginning to start happening. The only thing that concerned me about it was I was afraid that if it started happening, it would really impact the rest of our sports. And my guess is, unfortunately, that's probably going to happen. I've heard rumors that Stanford is talking about dropping a dozen sports or so. And there was a proud program that's won whatever that trophy's called, for the all sports trophy for the last X number of years. And they're going to be dropping like a third of their athletic department. I wouldn't be surprised that will come to Ohio State. And I never wanted that to happen, because I thought one of the fun parts about being in our athletic department was we had 1,000 student athletes. We had people going to the Olympics in rifle. We had women's hockey going to the Olympics. We had people representing other countries. And I thought that was a healthy thing for our players, to be around a family of 1,000 people that were very different. And honestly, we were the ones funding them. And there's no question about it. And our guys used to complain sometimes, hey, how come the volleyball team has 5 sweatsuits and we only have 1, whatever. And I used to always say, not that they bought it, but I used to always say, well, aren't you happy that you can provide all those sweatsuits for those people? Isn't that a warm feeling, in your mind? And so it's going to be interesting to see how all this, now they're not going to be paying players from the athletic department, but the money surrounding sport, the question is, will someone who normally buys a big sponsorship package with Ohio State, well, they're not allowed to do any of the name, image, likeness. So are they going to say, well, you know what, I'm going to go do a commercial. I'm going to have Fields come over and sign autographs instead of the sponsorship at Ohio State, those kinds of things. So stay tuned, Stephanie, in your career as a sports broadcaster and person that's going to be involved in this for many, many years. You're going to see a lot of changes. I've seen a lot of changes. This is my 46th year in higher education and athletics, and the amount of changes are amazing. But the reality is the only thing constant is change. And so you're just going to have to see how you fit into that change.
Yeah, more than ever this year, I've been saying expect the unexpected with a lot of things. But with NIL and the locker room, I'm wondering if there could be a divide. It's not going to be equal across the board. That was a concern that Coach Meyer mentioned. He was concerned that it may affect the dynamic of the locker room, and wondering how that would be managed as coaches. That could be a very difficult, change into their system.
It's interesting. I've thought of that too, although I reflected back, when our guys, after the season was over, it was interesting. If we won our bowl game and ended up, whether we were national champs or in the top 5 or whatever, it's amazing how much money they made when they were allowed to start signing autographs. And what a lot of our guys did was they said, hey, look, if you want me to come to this mall or whatever, to sign autographs for X number of dollars, you got to bring my buddies who aren't as well known. And so there was a little bit of drag along with that. And so maybe there will be the same in the NIL. Maybe some of the guys will be saying, hey, look, I don't want to be looked at in the locker room like I've got something going on that no one else does. So I might only say yes if they take 3 of you guys. So who knows how it's going to play out. There's no doubt about it, though, that it's new ground for us to cover. The people, though, as you brought out at the beginning, the people with the right culture will handle it much better than the people that are all free for all. I think the thing I would worry about, there are a lot of things that I didn't have to live with just 10, 11 years ago that they do now.
Social media, yeah.
Well, social media was starting to come pretty good there. The Apple 2007, when that iPhone came, we had plenty of years of that. Really, but its magnitude is much greater. Mm-hmm. But the whole bit about the transfer portal, mm-hmm. I mean, that was not part of the reality. There was not any guy playing second team saying, hey, I think I could go start over there, and I think I'll put my name in the portal. And there were times when, parents would say, I think Johnny should transfer because, he's playing behind a guy in the same class or, whatever. But I think one of the values of sport is fighting through that. And I'm a little bit concerned that the transfer portal is going to be an easy parachute out. And I think if you get used to parachuting, that can become a habit. And life, life isn't like, there isn't a transfer portal in life. And so I'm a little concerned about that. I didn't have to, put up with that, and name, image, likeness, was the chatter was beginning a little bit, but it wasn't as strong as it is now. So, it's a different world.
I listened to your interview with Kirk about a family member coming into your office saying, my son's not playing enough. And that was a good story. But with all the changes going on, Ohio State does have so many traditions that have persisted over the years, from the stickers on the helmet to removing a black stripe, removing the M's throughout the whole city. And, tradition, when you were there, I'm just wondering what it's like when you look back on that time and the traditions maybe you implemented or the ones that mean so much to you looking back.
It was interesting, Stephanie. I had been an assistant coach at Ohio State, so I knew of the traditions pretty well. I grew up in Ohio. But what I found interesting when I first got to campus as the head coach, I was having a chance to sit and talk with the guys returning, and that's always a hard transition. New coach is in, he didn't recruit me. How's he going to look at me? And so we spent a lot of hours talking with our guys. And one thing became a reality to me. While our guys were a little bit aware of the traditions, they weren't as aware as I thought they would be. And so I remember implementing my first year there that we were going to walk through the skull session because, everyone said they had heard of it, but they didn't really know what it was. Well, I got a lot of pushback. We don't want to do that. We're focused for the game, this and that. And I said, well, work with me. We're going to go do it. I want you to feel it. I said, I've never felt it. I was an assistant coach there. I heard about it all the time. I have friends who say they get up 6 hours early to get in line so they get a seat at the skull session. Let's go see, work with me. Well, the first time we went, it blew their minds. And if you try to keep them from going to the skull session, it would never happen. And then the other one, I remember going to the band and I asked the director, John Woods at the time, I said, John, I would really like to see if we could sing the alma mater with you at the end of the game. And I said, but the problem is at that time, the band was at the north end of the stadium, the closed end. I said, that would be difficult for us to go all the way to the north end and back to the south end where our locker rooms are. It would be harder to keep the guys, in line and so forth. Would you consider going to the south end of the stadium? On our way to the locker room, we'll stop and sing Carmen, Ohio. And he said, oh, shoot, we're in, we'll do it. Sit right in front of Block O. That'd be awesome. So I went to my guys and I said, okay, we're going to stop at the end zone and sing Carmen, Ohio. Well, they didn't even know what Carmen, Ohio was. But we as Buckeye fans looked at that as a big tradition. So again, there are a lot of pushback and I told them from the get-go, I said, hey, win or lose. I said, it's going to be hard. We lose a game in Ohio Stadium, that's hard enough. But if you have to stop and sing Carmen, Ohio, it's going to be even harder. So I just want you to know we're going to do it, win or lose. And they were moaning and groaning and so forth. Well, today, if you didn't go down and sing Carmen, in front of the students and the band, best damn band in the land, you would be run out of town. So, those were two of the ones that took a little bit of prodding, but those are two I'm very proud that I think will continue for a long time.
Yeah, this might be the first year since then that they weren't able to do that with the coronavirus restrictions. So it is a tough year, no fans. Some of those traditions aren't there, but I do think that singing the Carmen, Ohio is a big unifier for the team, win or lose. It definitely brings them together. So lots of good traditions at Ohio State. And looking back at some of the coaches that were there as well, just want to know what you think of Luke Fickell and what he's doing at Cincinnati right now, undefeated at ranked number 7, doing well.
Oh, Luke is outstanding. I didn't know Luke very well. But our first year there at Ohio State, we had a coach retire. And so we had an opening. And I felt as if we needed another Ohio State guy on our staff. We had Timmy Spencer, and he had played for Earl. We had Bill Conley, and Bill had played for Woody and then coached for Earl. But we didn't really have anyone that had that connectivity with John Cooper in that era. And there were 13 great years there. And to not have that connectivity. So when we had that opening, I said to Jim Haycock, I said, hey, I heard there's a good young guy at the University of Akron. I heard he played here. I heard he's a tough guy, state champion, high school wrestler, all that stuff. What do you think? You think he's ready? He said, well, he's only been coaching like for 2 years. And this is Ohio State. You can get whatever you want. And I said, yeah, but I think the thing we need, and going back to your phrase, culture, I think we need that culture that connects all the eras of Ohio State football to really become good. So we interviewed Luke, and he came and spent 9 years with us, and you just watched him grow. He was a young guy that just kept growing and growing and growing. And I talk with him frequently now since he's been at Cincinnati, and all those schools were after him to leave this past year, and to his credit, he had committed, to those kids, and he'd only been there 2 years, and that type of thing, and he's got a great program going. He's taken them to the next level. It was kind of like when Mark D'Antonio was on our staff, and we sent him to Cincinnati, and that was his catapult to Michigan State. But he had been at Michigan State before. Mm-hmm. That was a natural for him to make that move. I'm not sure that some of the ones that were open last year were a natural thing for Luke. Someday, there'll be a natural, maybe not. He might go down as the longest serving coach in Cincinnati history, but he's done a great job.
Yeah, I was able to talk to Coach Cooper when Luke Fickell returned to Ohio Stadium last season. It was fun to see that reunion. And so looking at how it's all grown, but I kind of wanted to dive into some of the questions on the forum from some of the folks at Buckeye Scoop. They wanted to know how much you are still in communication with Urban Meyer, and you said you spoke with Ryan Day, just, how you continued the conversations with them as well.
Well, Urban and I have had a chance. We cut a commercial.
I saw.
The whole COVID thing, so we had a lot of fun that day. And he's out, of course, on the West Coast a lot, with the. But off and on, he knows how busy a president is, and I knew when he was coaching how busy he was. We would talk occasionally. He would call if he ever had something that was. He didn't have anyone else to ask. Sometimes the only one you can ask is someone who's been there. So. It's been fun having a relationship with Urban. Coach Cooper, when I was there on staff, both Coach Cooper and Coach Bruce had an office in our building. And so we got to see those guys all the time. And of course, I still talk to Coach Fickell a lot and talk to Coach Day some. I don't know him as well. I never coached with him, but I probably talked to him more in March through August than any other time, because that was a tough time. That was a very difficult time. And so I had a chance to spend some good time with him on the phone and just talk about his feelings and help him kind of navigate that difficult situation. So, there's a little bit of a mini brotherhood. We always talk about the brotherhood, but there's a little bit of a mini brotherhood of anyone that coached there, whether you were the head coach or an assistant. Because it's a special responsibility, special blessing if you ever get a chance to coach at Ohio State.
Yeah, Miami had the Cradle coaches. We'll have to come up with a name for the Buckeye coaches.
Well, I was just down there, Stephanie. I was inducted into the Cradle of Coaches Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So I'm big time because I coached there.
Right.
Back in the
Yager Stadium.
A funny story about that. Our stadium was Miami Field. And it was right behind Withrow Court, kind of right next to where the baseball field, I think, may still be. Baseball
field's pretty far back. The Yager's pretty far back too. But
Yager's down the hill.
Yeah.
See, we were up the hill, where the dorms are right there.
So they must have made that a dorm then.
Yeah, right behind whatever that main street is that goes down to Yager. Old Miami Field, just as you come into the campus, on the right was Miami Field. And I think there's buildings there now. But I was there in the late 70s. I guess 1980 was my last year. And there was all the discussion about building the stadium down the hill where it is now. And every year from 1949 to about 1983, every year at the end of November, one of the local construction companies brought a bulldozer in, down the hill, and we would tell the recruits we're building a new stadium.
Oh.
That happened for 30 some years. And I remember that it was really heating up, the discussion about should we build it down there? And I was on the side of against it, because what was so cool about Miami Field is it was surrounded by dorms.
Yeah.
So all the kids would come in and out of the dorms during the game, and we were always packed. I mean, it was packed house all the time. And I said, even though you're only moving down the street about 3/4 of a mile.
It's pretty far for Miami.
Pretty far.
Miami, you walk everywhere. And that's a distance for a Miami walk.
That's a distance for a Miami walk. And so I don't know if they've done a very good job with attendance ever since.
It's hard to fill. I will say, I always joke. I believe when I was a student at Miami, I felt Miami students would go to an Ohio State game more than they had been to a Miami football game. Yeah. It's just, different circumstances.
The new building they built?
Oh, the new business school?
No, but the new indoor practice field and all that.
Oh, I did. I went back for my homecoming one year, and yeah, I did some interviews there as well. Yeah, it's cool, and I think they have Roethlisberger written on the back too.
He gave a lot of money, and it's a beautiful. It's $46 million
Yeah.
facility. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Miami was a good time. And so another question they wanted to ask was, going back to coaches, what you learned from your father or Bruce or, coaches before you that really led to your career as well.
Well, I think anyone that's in coaching really is a product of whoever they're around. So I was lucky. My father was a coach for many, many years. And so I got to watch it growing up. I got to play for him. And what I learned more than anything from him is that you have to care for the players. The other sign, other than the Albert Einstein quote I mentioned to you that we used to always hang on our staff wall, was they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's what I learned from my dad. And, you've got to care about your players. And so I was fortunate growing up. I got to watch him. Then I got to work for 4 really good head coaches: Jim Dennison at the University of Akron, Tom Reed at Miami, Dick McPherson at Syracuse, and then Earl Bruce. And they were all very different. And what was beautiful about those guys was I could learn a little bit of what I would want to do and not want to do. And they were all different and all very successful. And so I knew you didn't have to look one way, to be successful. You didn't have to be a clone of someone else. That your job was to design who you were. And then the other group that really had a lot of impact on my coaching career were all the assistant coaches I worked with in my 11 years as an assistant coach. Guys that, I learned so much from. I learned how to recruit from them. I learned how to X's and O's, learned how to treat people. So all of us really are fortunate, to have that group of people around us. And what's critical, I think, is you can be around people and not pay attention and not learn a thing. Or you can be around a lot of good people and pay close attention. And that's what I tried to do, is pay close attention and really take all that I could from everyone that I was a part of.
Yeah, I think a lot of that still runs through at Ohio State. I can see from Coach Meyer to Coach Day, the way he handled the pandemic. They really, really do care for their players. And so that's really, really fun for me to cover as well. And so the next question I have was, there was a panel interview talking about who was the hardest to take a hit from at practice. And they said Kirk Barton. So just wanted to hear what you thought about, hear about Kirk at practices.
Well, Kirk was always full speed. That was the problem. He was going to be, if you weren't braced when Bart was on the field, you were going to get hit. He wanted to be good. I mean, Kirk Barton had one of those passions about the game, very tough on himself. He never thought he was as good as he could be. So he always wanted to get better. And the only way he saw that you could do it is do it full speed, do it full contact. And so, yeah, there's no doubt. I wouldn't have wanted to be a scout team guy lined up.
That's what they said.
No, there was no day off against Kirk Barton.
I also did an interview with AJ Hawk and got some fun interviews from his buddies Schlegel and Bobby Carpenter, and they had some fun insight. I guess there was a lot of shenanigans. And so what I learned was Bobby, they all said, was the most likely to walk off on a coach or fight a coach. What's your reaction to that?
Oh, yeah. Bobby fought the coaches every day. I mean, that's just who he was. You know how Bobby is. Bobby's the smartest guy in the room.
Passionate, the general.
So there's no way you weren't, whatever you suggested, there was going to be at least a debate. Maybe not, but there was at least going to be a debate. But that's good, because we talked about earlier, you want to know what your guys are thinking. Mm-hmm. And was transparent. He wanted to be good. He was a full speed ahead guy as well. And he was going to let you know if he saw things differently. That's exactly what you want. We used to always say, if you find out what someone's thinking, 2 things can happen, and they're both good. One is you can get some great ideas. You can say, you know what? I never thought of that. And the second thing that can happen is you can clarify where someone might be misinformed.
Yeah.
If they say, you know what, hey, we shouldn't be doing it this way, we should do this and that, and then it gives you a chance to say, well, here's why we're doing it this way. Here's what we've learned. You see this here, let's put the film on, whatever. And they say, oh, I see that. And then they buy in. But had you not known that they had a misconception or that they had thoughts otherwise, you might never have gotten them to have that 100% buy-in.
Wow. Good that it was received so well. That's really awesome. So there was a lot of talk about this restaurant in Youngstown, MVR. What's your favorite dish? Is it the Coach's Cajun sandwich, the Tressel tortellini? We got a couple questions about this place.
Well, the MVR is legendary. In fact, I'm sitting in my home on campus, and it's right behind my home, just over the hill. And it's kind of the local hangout for the YSU people, and it has a lot of sports tradition. It's been there since 1927.
Like a varsity club, maybe.
Yeah, it's like a varsity club, but it's kind of a little bit more on a national scope. You know, the Stoops hang out here, and you know, Boom Boom Mancini will be in there, and Ernie Kosar will be in there. So it's not just a YSU place. It's kind of a Northeast Ohio place. I've been here for 83 years. I mean, it's special. So as far as my favorite dish, I would always, for lunch, go with the Coach's Cajun chicken. My dish for after the game was always tortellini, and that's why they renamed it Tressel tortellini, because I would always have that after the game. But the MVR's got a big menu, and I don't hold it just those two things. Although I will say this with great pride, Tressel tortellini is their number one seller.
Oh, yeah. The Buckeye Scoop people were talking about maybe doing a lunch down there. And so the final the final question we have is the most shocking loss, or maybe a play that just had you staying up at night, like just couldn't get off your mind. Maybe when you look back, which games or plays in particular that just really ate at you?
Gosh, there's so many.
That's a good react. Oh, I was going to say, if you can't think of one, that's a good thing.
Well, no, I can think of more than one. You coach long enough, you're going to have some losses and disappointing ones as well. Let me give you one that one might not think about. Okay, so my first year at Ohio State was not a great year, and I think we were. I don't know. Let's say 3 or 5-3 or something. Let me think here. It was a little bit, maybe 5-3 going into the last two games. That year was an 11-game schedule, and so I think we were 5-3. And if we beat Illinois at home, and then beat Michigan on the road, we're the outright Big Ten champs. And we hadn't been outright Big Ten champs since like 1980 something. So we go into the game, had a little bit of a dust up, and had to sit one of our players, who is an important guy, but we were really getting better. Even though we didn't have a great record, by the end of the year, we were getting better. And we had Illinois really right where we wanted them. And then all we needed to do was go to Ann Arbor, and we were going to go beat them. So that wasn't even a question in our minds. And so we had a punt blocked. And it really, turned the game around. We ended up losing the game at home, which it's no fun to live at home. For the first time, we had to sing Carmen, Ohio, in front of our fans after a loss. Which was a difficult thing for our people to handle, because Carmen, Ohio wasn't that normal of a thing yet for us. And so that play, because I've always been one that has said the punt can devastate a game than any other single play. We've had a lot of Teddy Ginn punt return touchdowns that turned Michigan games around and those kinds of things. But it can also devastate you. And that one cost us a chance to take a team who was going through transition, who, had a brand new staff. We were just getting to know one another. That play kept us from, being able to progress. Now, the good news is we went up to Ann Arbor and we won that game. So we kind of got back on better footing. But, had we not done that, I might have been I would have been teaching math at a junior high somewhere, and I might have looked back at that punt block and said that changed my career.
Yeah, winning is more of a relief. Like people, they fear losing more than they want to win the Michigan game. It's the loss would just eat at them. But I would be remiss if I.
Who said that? Because I would like to get in it. Was that Carpenter?
Coach Day said that, and after the win was winning or beating at Michigan was just such a weight off your shoulders because, the win would feel great, but the loss would just be unbearable. And I felt that from the team as well, is that winning feels great, but the loss is just brutal, especially with the way they prepare for that game.
Yeah.
So,
well, I can agree that the loss feels terrible because we lost once in 2003. We won 9 times. I still think that the desire to win the game is way more motivating to me than worrying about how you feel if you lose.
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask. A lot of people are asking, who do you think would be a good coach for the team up north if things aren't going so well for Harbaugh come the end of the season? I figured Fickell probably couldn't do it. It would be hard to be in that rivalry on the other side of the ball, but.
It's interesting. I hadn't given that any thought. I thought going in, I didn't know Jim Harbaugh, but he had done some good things at Stanford and San Francisco, and so I thought he might do okay. I don't think he has done as well as everyone hoped. But I would say this to you. I tell people all the time, the 3 most important things that happened, if you look at the history of the Ohio State-Michigan game, Michigan won 20 of the first 21. Mm-hmm. Then there was a pretty even stretch there, and then there was a down stretch, and now we've won, 18 of the last 20 or something. But the 3 things I think that really turned that rivalry around, and it took a lot of years, but the first one was when Paul Brown was hired as the coach at Ohio State, and he was a high school coach from Ohio, Massillon High School. And at that time in the 1940s, the best high school players in Ohio didn't necessarily think of Ohio State first. They thought about Notre Dame. They thought about Michigan. They even thought about Iowa and Purdue. Ohio State was not really the head of the class. But when Paul Brown got there, he got that turned around very well and made us much more competitive in the recruiting. Then the next thing, fast forward about another, let's say 50 years, Andy Geiger and John Cooper decided, we've got to change the way this place looks. Ohio Stadium had gotten kind of old. They had done nothing with facilities. The Woody Hayes Center was nothing to write home about. You couldn't even, you had to have offices at St. John Arena. You drove your car to the Woody Hayes. The facilities were not going to put you up in the top recruiting echelon. Mm-hmm. John Cooper and Andy Geiger, what they did with a facility change was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And then thing, fast forward maybe another 7 or 8 years, was really beginning in 2002. Ohio State got all the best players from Ohio. Very few exceptions. And so I guess a long answer to your short question, I don't think Michigan can ever be Michigan as we remember them if they don't have great Ohio players. Go back to their history and go back and look in, the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, before we closed the door on the recruiting, their best players were from Ohio. And that has not been the case. So they better get someone that can recruit Ohio, because Ohio clearly, Ohio and Western PA clearly have the best football in 10 states. And if you're going to be able to be an elite team, you better get your share of those players from those 10 states, and most especially Ohio and Western PA. And if you can't, you're going to be an average team like Michigan has been really since about 2008. Our first 7 games against them, they were really good. They were the old Michigan. Really since 2008, they've just been, not quite as good. And I think if I were their search committee or whatever, I'd say I better find someone that can recruit Ohio. And it's going to be tough now because Ohio State's got it going.
They're taking a heavy lead. I guess we'll finish on a good note. What is your favorite football memory or your favorite football win? Just what makes you smile when you look back?
The thing that makes me smile is when I see what our guys are doing after they've been in our program. I see their families, I see their businesses, I see the community service they do, I see the difference they're making in society. That makes me smile more than, the problem with a big win is you smile for about 12 hours and then you're back at work. But when you smile about someone's success, that smile stays on your face for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's always bigger than football. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I wish you all the best of luck right now getting through this pandemic.
You as well.
Thank you again. I appreciate it. And I hope you have a good one. You too.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.